I'm not sure if it begins today, but I think we're adding an extra hour Monday through Friday on radio station WRMI.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
We're currently talking about adding the frequency 9455 kilohertz beginning at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, which currently is 2000 hours UTC. And I want to thank all of you that are listening either by podcast or even on radio. This program, Truth to Ponder, is something that I've thought about for a while, but it seems today and now is the time and the hour for such a program. I've got so many good friends that I'm beginning to count on as regular guests, and you're going to be hearing a lot from them over the next days and weeks and even months. There's a lot at stake in our world. That's why this program was started. I want to be a voice of truth and reason and try to cut through all the nonsense and public relations garbage that sometimes many people buy into. Today I'm going to spend probably most of the program just looking at some of the current news headlines and things of interest and try to sift through all the noise. I try to avoid being emotional, if that makes any sense. I don't like to get too deep into emotion when trying to sort truth from fiction. One of the things that people on the left side of the spectrum count on is being able to manipulate you, young people, and others with raw emotion and try to couch the argument in such a way that if you sound like you disagree, you're just a horrible and mean and evil person. We've talked about this one, the term Black Lives Matters. How can any reasonably intelligent person deny that statement at face value? Even if you try to expose the fraudulency of the movement, Black Lives Matters, and what they really stand for, you are smeared as a hater, a Neanderthal, and even worse. You're a racist. You're a bigot. If you say anything detrimental in the wrong way, Facebook says you're spreading fake news. Our fact checkers just figured it out. The Facebook fact checkers are a bunch of fascists. They're a bunch of fascist fools that are lying to you. Facebook is not your friend. If you're involved with a church and your entire mission and ministry or your business is dependent upon Facebook, you risk being in a pretty bad place in the not too distant future. I have seen things that I know to be factual, not because I want to believe it, not because I found it on some obscure website or a chain email or even on Twitter. These are things that I have firsthand knowledge. It's not speculation when I talk about certain things in the work that I have done. Watching how they are gradually controlling the narrative. They are now big enough, they believe, to control the conversation and the narrative in the United States today. And that makes a tech tyrant like a Facebook ultimately dangerous to freedom in this country. It's not a matter of freedom of speech. Everybody's entitled to that. But they are a monopoly controlling a platform to limit the kind of speech and to even outright lie and tell distortions and say certain news is fake because we have to make it look fake. We are living in an unprecedented time in my life. The likes I've never seen. I've never seen anything like this. The pandemic, the riots, BLM, Black Lives Matters, really stands for burning, looting, and murdering on their part in too many cases. Look at the wildfires out west. Everybody in the left says, see, it's all climate change. Climate change. And that's why the forests are burning and the bunnies are dying, and hogwash. Rubbish. Nonsense. Even the Native Americans found in the United States understood 200 years ago and more the concept of controlled burning. They were doing it out west long before white man from Europe and his climate change ever found this continent and crossed the Mississippi River. That's a fact. They understood forest management, something today we just let everything go el natural. We don't clean up the mess. Had a good friend of mine many, many years ago in Florida. He'd lived there for virtually most of his life. I think he was born up north, but he was down there by the time he was like 4 or 5. He passed away in his 80s, but so I would consider him about as close to being a native Floridian as you get. And he didn't live in the big cities. He lived in more of the rural areas for a long time. So he understood we have that problem from time to time in Florida. We have all kind of seed grasses. We have all kind of brush, scrubby stuff growing all over the place in the more rural parts of the state. Not everything looks like Palm Beach or Miami. There's a tremendous amount of ruralness in the state of Florida. It just takes one dry winter, which happens very frequently and has for as long as anybody can remember, and all the dead brush gets hit by that first couple of lightning strikes as you come into spring, and you have some wildfires. And I like the expression that he once had. Florida is one of those states that after God created it, he lit the first match. Because it's a natural life cycle in Florida to have burning and then rain that puts it out. And it's amazing how after all the scrub brush and dead limbs and debris are burned off, how green everything becomes in a short amount of time. It's the way it was created, the way it was designed. Yet we have people trying to run roughshod and try to say, no, we can't clean up the underbrush. We can't do a controlled burn. Look, nature was giving you controlled burns on a pretty regular basis, and if not, even the Native Americans that were here hundreds upon hundreds of years ago. You have utility companies being told they can't clear the underbrush on either side and underneath, 35,000 and 100,000 volt power lines that attract all kinds of trouble if the line ever comes down in a storm. And then a fire. They're forbidden to do that. People were forbidden to even have fire breaks near their homes in many places because of environmental insanity. Now, from my personal point of view, from a scriptural point of view, these are people that are worshiping the earth and not the creator of the earth. And thus they have this reprobate, strange mindset about worshiping the earth. We've got some real troubles in this country. Climate change is not one of them. One of the candidates talking about how if we continue in this rate, we're going to have more of this, more flooding, more dangerous hurricanes. Yeah, this has been a very active hurricane season. I'm watching a lot of them just fizzle out in the ocean. Yeah, there are going to be a few strong ones. But I've seen worse years in my life 20 plus years ago, 30 years ago, before we really looked at the entire Atlantic Ocean to even know we had storms coming. There's no way to know the number of storms that were forming in the Atlantic that never made it to shore anywhere in the 1800s, early 1900s, all the way to the middle of the 20th century. We had no way to know. We have great technology that shows us things, so we're looking in a limited scope of activities of the last, less than 30, 40, 50 years. This earth is more resilient than sometimes we care to remember. Truly so. It is a very resilient planet. It has withstood a lot more than we care to admit. Reading an interesting article, very scientific, not one of those things you just find on the internet, not made up by somebody as a keyboard warrior in their basement. As we go deep into ice shafts, kind of gives you a little snapshot in time from 50 years, 100,000, 2,000 years, even more. We're learning something that I find rather fascinating. That there was a time that the CO2 level in the atmosphere, they can tell that by when you analyze the ice, you can kind of figure out what the atmosphere was like that's frozen and contained within. The CO2 concentrate was a lot higher at various points in our history than it is today, like on the magnitude of 10 to 20 times higher. Do you know what would happen if CO2 was 10 times higher than it is today? Would it make a greenhouse effect? Not necessarily, but I'll tell you what it will do. Plant life, vegetables, trees, they grow significantly better in a higher concentration of CO2. And what do these plants and trees exhale? Especially when they're growing rapidly. O2, oxygen, what you and I need to live and survive. This is truly a distorted world. No doubt in my mind about it. We're worshiping the earth. As I tell people, every time I hear some idiotic politician run and flap their gums and make some insidious, stupid comment like, we've only got 10 years left. We only have 12 years left, or the world is going to be destroyed. You remember the congresswoman that sent that, the former bartender turned congresswoman from New York. Bernie Sanders says it. Now we have Joe Biden saying it. And they try to explain to you that, we're going to kill off the polar bears or this, that, and the other because man-made climate change. I'm going to give you a couple of facts here in a moment. These aren't made up. These have been around for a long time. Proven, tested, reliable. We've been hearing the world has only got 10 years left for at least 50 years that I've been around to pay attention. I'm 65, so I'm going to be 66. I was like 16 when we had pushing 16 when we had the first Earth Day way back in 1970. And we were told we were going to be going into like a nuclear winter. I mean, it was going to be, we're going to freeze to death. Even snowfall in Miami, Florida, because of man-made this, that, and the other. And I've told you this story before if you've listened to the weekend program, how the Cuyahoga River between Akron and Cleveland had caught fire from industry, and they pronounced it dead for 10,000 years. Man destroyed it. No way to fix it. 10,000 years. Hang your head in shame. And now the Cuyahoga River looks as pristine as the day before man showed up. This earth can take care of itself a lot better than we ever dare give it credit. I've been hearing we only have 10 years left for 50 years. I thought my house in Florida was supposed to be underwater by now. Like 4 or 5 years ago. Don't see that happening. Virtually every apocalyptic prediction of man-made climate change, if they put a date on it, not 100 years in the future when we're all going to be dead and gone, but I'm saying one that we could arrive at. Those that have come to those dates have come and gone and have been wrong. Why would you give any credence to a bunch of people whose track record is virtually 100% wrong? I've heard the old saying, a clock is right, what, twice a day? There's a lot of minutes in a 24-hour period of time. Do we destroy our economy on a theory? Here's what we do know. Let's talk about carbon and all the terrible things that carbon is supposed to do, like make plant life better. Here's what we do know. 95%, or no, 90%, I take it back, 90% of all the carbon tossed into the air that floats around the sky has come from volcanoes. Yeah, they're still out there. They still spit out stuff. And China, all by its lonesome, produces 5% of all carbon emissions in the world. We only are playing with the last 5% among the Western world. So even if we all virtually stopped everything and we could go from 100%, drop it down 1% or 2%, what difference is it going to make? None. It's going to be immeasurable, but we'll destroy an entire economy, and we will use emotion and scare little kids in school that polar bears are going to die because mommy and daddy drive an SUV or some other such silliness. Why do we want to allow these people, and this is what it boils down to, why do you want to allow these people to pass around misinformation, miseducate your children? Yeah, the schools are a part of this cabal too. If you don't believe it, if you don't believe the schools are a part of the disaster that is the impending doom of this country, the loudest cheerleaders for the self-destruction of the United States is the unionized education system in the United States. No doubt about it. If you don't believe that, let's look at some of the school union demands to go back to a classroom. Their demands have nothing to do with the pandemic. I could understand it. I could actually feel sorry, and I might even support them if there was even one smattering of evidence to prove any of, if the pandemic would be dangerous. I mean, here's what we're going to talk about. Let's look at the pandemic only first. If a union said, we do not want our teachers back in the classroom until we have a sufficient level of safety and the infections have gone down and whatever the matter may be, I could understand that. Especially if you're a teacher in their 50s that has underlying health issues, would you want to put yourself at risk? I can be thoroughly sympathetic on that. But we know from Sweden, we know from other countries that there's no documented case of a student ever spreading COVID-19 to a teacher in a school. Period. No evidence of teachers passing on this virus to a school teacher or employee. Period. So that's not even what they're fighting about. The teachers union in Los Angeles, they're not talking about until it is safe, they're not even talking about that. That's not even in their discussion points. what is in their discussion points that I find most disconcerting is they will come back and teach our children in the public schools when there is universal Medicare for everybody, open borders for everybody. What's that have to do with COVID-19? They are talking about things that have nothing to do with the coronavirus. But everything in changing the structure of this country, the United States of America. And this is what the teachers' unions are demanding. They're wanting a charter school moratorium. In fact, they want to have all those charter schools defunded. They don't want any possibility of any kind of money going to any private school that would be competition to the crappy job they're doing in educating our kids today. They do a dismal job, garbagey job, worthless job. They should be fired kind of job. They also want to defund the police. If you don't defund the police, we're not going to come back and teach. Well, I got a great idea. Let's increase police funding and call their bluff. They want Medicare for all, defunding of police, and no competition to the garbagey job they do, pretending that they're educators. They're indoctrinators. They don't know how to teach. They don't even care about teaching much anymore in many of the schools. I'll tell you something I ran across, and I thought this was kind of fascinating. When we start talking about some of the nonsense that's going on, and what you're going to find in some of these, I don't know. I've got some paperwork here in front of me. I've been collecting some material over the last day or so. So here we are 6 months into this pandemic. This was written a little while back. And how are kids going to be taught? We're seeing something that I think is great, where some parents are banding together and putting together little, shall we say, school pods, so to speak, where they're literally pooling their resources to hire an instructor to teach a small group of students real stuff, where they can really do math and really read and really write and really know history. Maybe there is a silver lining with this pandemic after all. And you look at schools like Los Angeles. They spend billions of dollars on immigrants and people that are not even citizens to attend school. We're spending, like, in some places, 24 to even higher amounts of money, $24,000 or more per student. That means if I have 10 first graders, there's $250,000 on the table to educate those 10 first graders or fifth graders. If somebody was smart, they would figure a way to be able to do a lot better for less, and most private schools actually do. But one of the things that parents are learning, see, when kids started to have to learn things at home with online schools, the one thing that I don't think the parents, well, actually the educators didn't count on, were parents kind of curious of what are my kids learning? Right now, we have all these students in online, and parents are now learning for the first time because they're maybe looking. Like for example, a cartoon associating police with the KKK went from a classroom to a living room to a press room and now to the governor in Texas, who is furious. I don't blame him. Al Cooper, a junior high 8th grader, students, Al Cooper's junior high. The 8th grade students were assigned to write about a political cartoon that depicts slave owners, then the KKK, and then the police in corresponding, cartoon panels. Furious parents only accidentally learned about the assignment because their children, they're doing it at home on their little issued computers. The governor of Texas says the teacher responsible for that assignment should be removed from the teaching business, and I fully agree. Have you heard about what's called the 619 Project, the 1619 Project? That's supposed to be the real founding of our racist, horrible, evil nation that needs to be destroyed from the inside out, according to the New York Times and a bunch of other people that make up new history, just like the Ministry of Truth does. The 1619 Project includes a school curriculum that would change how history is taught. And it makes the year 1619 the year that slaves arrived in Virginia, and we're going to call that the founding of our nation. Well, it isn't. About 100 years before, the Spanish were bringing them over too. We don't even talk about that. And they try to explain that the entire Revolutionary War was all about slavery. Really? You better take that up with the people from England at that time. See, they didn't want slavery in their country. They just wanted it over in the colonies. And remember, they ran the colonies. Had nothing to do with slavery. People in Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, for the most part, Delaware, that's not where slaves were. The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere was not about slavery in Massachusetts. There wasn't any. It wasn't something that people up there did. Something that was in the coastal South primarily, and a few isolated places inland. And maybe in parts of southern Alabama where you had the rivers to navigate to get your crops to the Gulf of Mexico to be transported. I'll tell you what, parents are beginning to wake up to the insanity that is the schools of today. Parents are seeing what's going on. Like I say, some have hired and got the resources to get a private instructor. One public school teacher who is anti-union and just wanted to teach is thrilled about this, able to leave their job now, and this is what they're going to do. The heck, they're not going back. They don't want to go back to the indoctrination centers where they're told what they can think and how to think and how to tell the kids to think. They're tired of, they're tired literally of having to lie to these children and try to undo what's going on at home. You remember the story. We talked about this in the program, I think, last week, where a 12-year-old, it's kind of like 7th grade, middle school, not even high school yet, middle school, has a Nerf gun. Pretty obvious. It's got the little orange thing in the front. It's made out of plastic. And he's sitting at home, in his living room. Gets computer on a little table or something nearby him or on the coffee table in front. And he just happened to move his plastic toy gun from one side to the other, just moving it. He's suspended from school. You hear that? He's suspended from school for having a gun in class. I'm sorry, but it's not your classroom. It's not your house. You're not paying the property tax, the mortgage, or whatever else. It's none of your business, school district. How dare you suspend a student? Oh, yeah, and of course they had to send the sheriff's office over. Well, we kind of knew it was a toy gun, but it's the point, you understand. The point. What point? It's time to kick public education into the trash can of failures and throw it away. Dump it in a landfill where it belongs. Public education stinks. Public education has gone downhill. When students can't read and students can't write, when they know nothing about history but they know about Black Lives Matter and everybody's a racist and this country sucks, that's kind of what they say, it's time for us to take education back.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
And very quickly, before I forget, we have a website. I want you to go by and visit. It is truth2ponder.com. Truth2ponder.com.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
I bet some people are going, I thought this was your weekend show. Those that are listening on perhaps Saturday and Sunday and from the Your Weekend Show website, since I began the new program, Truth to Ponder, I decided to use the Friday edition of Truth to Ponder for the weekend program. We've been doing the weekend show since literally March of 2015. So we finished up our 5th anniversary back in March, and now we are, 5.5 years in on your weekend show. But a while back, I just felt, at least for the time being, this incredible necessity for doing this very special program, Truth to Ponder, and do it Monday through Friday. And I know some people listen on a regular basis Monday through Friday and take their weekends off from listening to radio or podcast, and there's some that listen primarily on the weekend. And as we get more material put aside, I kind of have a goal of converting the weekend show kind of a best of what happened during Truth to Ponder. It takes a lot of effort to put a show like this together. And your encouragement to me is, you just don't know how much it means to hear from you as I put this show together each and every week. Would you consider dropping me a line? You can do it from the website, truth2ponder.com, truth2ponder.com. If you simply want to directly email and bypass the website and all that stuff, it is just Bob at truth2ponder.com. That is truth2ponder.com. Every once in a while, somebody will want to use regular United States mail, or if you're coming from another country, even international post. And they would like to know what the actual physical mailing address is. And right now, my wife and I, we have a little place up in Georgia and a place down in Florida. We are in Georgia at least into November. So if you're mailing something in the next, month, it will easily get here in time. And the address up here is 21 Berkshire. 21 Berkshire, that's spelled Berkshire, 21 Berkshire. And right on that same line, just add the number 263. That is number 263. There's a reason that the post office up here needs that, number 263. And the city is Sky Valley. 2 words, Sky Valley, and the state is Georgia, and the zip code here, postal code 30537. 30537. That address again in its entirety is 21 Berkshire, Berkshire Lane, number 263, in Sky Valley, Georgia, 30537. 21 Berkshire Lane, number 263, Sky Valley, Georgia, 30537. I'd love to hear from you. Maybe some thoughts and comments as we do this program. I'm getting to that age where I look at this world, and it's hard sometimes to even be polite anymore. With the in-your-face attitude of so many that are lying to you. Black lives matter. Yes, they do. All lives matter, especially in the sight of God. But Black Lives Matter is a rallying cry for anything but black lives. all the riots, all the burning, people being killed, people being blocked, people being beat up, kicked on the ground, knocked unconscious by these looting rioters that set fires to cars, destroy people's businesses, including black business. How does that work? How does a black life matter if you're destroying totally their livelihood? I don't understand it. It's an insanity, the types I've never seen before in my life. But then again, as I mentioned in the first half of the program today, this concept of worshiping the earth leads to a reprobate mind, where all the things that are wrong seem right, the things that are right are now wrong. It really is playing out right before our very eyes. You could even see it in the eyes of some of these people. It's almost like demonic possession as they set things on fire, set dumpsters on fire, roll them down streets, busting and screaming, banging on doors, cursing loudly. I don't condone when law enforcement of any kind has any kind of racial animus toward anybody. But to listen to the Black Lives propagandists talk, you would think that hundreds of thousands of black people are being beaten up and killed every year in this country. I mean, you really would. You would think that all people in the United States that are not of color are purely racist, mean-spirited, and evil. You know, I have met some pretty obnoxious racist people in my younger years, and thankfully they're dying out. Truthfully, they are. But let me tell you a couple of things. It's only been a handful of people that have died, whether by accident or by design or by error or by reacting incorrectly at the hands of the police. And yes, those lives matter. No doubt about it. They thoroughly and always will matter. But those seem to be the only ones that allegedly matter. Those for a political purpose and agenda that has nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. If they really did matter, these syphilis brain protesters, sorry, that's what it is. I mean, it's like a rotting of the brain. It is the reprobate mind. They wouldn't be setting fire to black-owned businesses. I mean, really. Or setting fire and destroying the only places that some people can buy their groceries within walking distance or get their prescriptions filled. These narcissistic brats that are filled with garbage and sewage from the school system run around thinking that they're doing some godly work, and it's the most ungodly, satanic work I've ever seen. It is purely evil what is occurring in the name of Black Lives Matters. Because, see, if they really did matter, if they mattered, they'd be in front of an abortion clinic where black babies are disproportionately aborted. They'd be standing in neighborhoods in Chicago demanding that the police act and arrest those that are causing gang violence, where 5, 10, 15 or more get killed every weekend in just one city like Chicago that represents less than 1% of the population of the United States. Let me give you a little bit of a mathematical comparison and see if this helps. As I said, listen to some of these people. You'd think that, you had hundreds or thousands of black people being killed by the police. So let's just go back to last year. Just last year. Depending upon whose figures you want to go with, And there are a couple that are questionable. One says 8, the other 13. The number of those that were killed who were unarmed by the police, okay? That's not in Chicago. That's in the entire United States of America. 8 or 13. So let's go with the higher number. That in a country of 330 million people, that the police killed 13 unarmed black individuals in all of the year 2019. All the entire year. Now, in Chicago, as I said before, typically 10, 15, one weekend 18. It's been as high as 25. Were murdered by other blacks in their own communities. As a matter of fact, in 2019, 492 to be precise, black-on-black deaths. Now, Chicago represents a little under 1% of the population of the United States. If police were mean and racist and horrible and evil and killing unarmed black people at the rate that blacks kill blacks in Chicago, there'd be 59,000 dead. You heard that. If the police were killing blacks at the rates that black kill other black males in Chicago, and let's not even counting the kids that get injured, be 59,000, but it's only 13. And for that, we have a whole organization that has caused mega millions, if not, who knows, it may get toward $1 billion before it's over, dollars in damage to businesses, homes, lives, let alone the economic damage. Businesses that'll never reopen in places like Minnesota. They've had enough. They're not coming back. They're gone. Stores that used to be where people could get their groceries and buy their pharmaceutical goods, closed, gone, may never come back. Who'd want to come back to a neighborhood where people will bust down the windows, steal everything, set it on fire, and loot it? Why would you go there? Why would anybody want to go there? And all demanding at the same time, defund the police, so then you have no protection. What kind of insanity is this? We truly live in evil times. And we are truly seeing, the Bible says, you reap what you sow. In other words, you plant tomatoes, you get tomatoes. You plant corn, you get corn. You plant good, you get good. You plant evil, you get evil. And that's what's been going on in our country for years. Systematically, one brick at a time. Our country is being turned into a place that only demons would be thrilled to inhabit. There's a little booklet. Someone had sent me some information about it, and I didn't, I'm one of those kind of guys, no offense. If you send me something, I will double check it because there's so much stuff on the internet that's simply not true. People may want to believe it's true, but it's not. I'm very careful about the information I pass on to you. I want to make sure that it's vetted. If you hear me telling you something, you can be assured. You can be assured that I've looked it up. The Nicodemus Orthodox Publication Society has a little book out. And they put it out about 10 or 15 years ago. You can buy it online. I've seen it even on Amazon for about $8, whatever. And it's a book called Reflections of a Humble Heart. And it was written somewhere in the 15th century. It's a manuscript of a monk that was stored in of all places, the Vatican archives, but whatever. In any case, the first section of this book recounts a visit with the elder in question. These are people in the 15th century. That's like, the 1400s. praying and trying to understand the world in which they lived. Remember, it wasn't that many years before that much of Europe had been decimated by the Black Death, the plague. And these monks in their prayer, and you call it prophecy, call it a word from God, call it whatever you want to call, but they were given this bit of knowledge. And they discuss the rise of the Antichrist and what will happen in the end times. This apocalyptic, is it the apocalyptic age? Is it, our eschatology, whatever you want to call it. And according to this publication, this little book written back in the 15th century, a nation will go through 5 stages before it completely will collapse. Now, this means this is not just the end times. This is like the end for a nation, okay? Now, let me tell you, when you learn what these stages are, it really, I look at it today and I am amazed. Stage 1, financial collapse. The lack of belief that business as usual will prevail. In the stage, redlining is extended to affluent areas and credit becomes impossible to obtain. You remember back in 2009, it was getting really rough. But it's going to happen in a lot of neighborhoods just because of the Floyd riots and other things. No one's going to want to go to some areas. Stage 2, commercial collapse, where people begin to think the free market will provide for material. Black and gray markets will be created as workarounds when you can't get certain things, like in the Second World War. Iron Curtain countries before the Berlin Wall fell. Let's be honest, cigarettes and dollars and all kinds of things were exchanged for basic necessities. Political collapse. This is exemplified by the demoralization of things like the police force. This is written before current days, by the way, where people looked at this. This is a while back, maybe 2013. When you're seeing what you're seeing now in Minneapolis is a good example. When you don't have you can't have any faith in government anymore because you can't trust them. A social collapse. Yeah, I think we've seen that, and I think that some of the garbage on Facebook has speeded up our social collapse. And then in stage 5, you have this cultural collapse, a lack of belief that there's any good in humanity left. And it becomes a clear case of, to even think for a moment that we would consider anything much less left in social media of any more moral value. We are in a decay in this country. There's no if, ands, or buts about it. We are in a social and decay. Some countries are at stage 3, some are at stage 4. None are before stage 2 anymore, I don't think. We're going to see, like I say, you're looking at this concept, people being told that, black individuals are being shot down and killed like racist dogs. It's insane. What we're seeing happen right now, in my opinion, this is a prelude toward our own self-destruction. Literally, our own self-imposed, suicidal self-destruction. What does all this mean for you and me? I could go on with a lot more, but I don't want to add I've given you a lot of information already. And we'll talk more maybe tomorrow or next week, and there's just a lot on my mind. We have come to a time of a huge crossroad, in my opinion. We no longer can ever consider the United States, especially Canada, a Christian nation anymore. We're not. There was a time that we had Christian values exemplified in even the way we taught our students, even in a secular school. But those days are gone. The evil one has tried to substitute evil and lies for truth and decency. Our children are being indoctrinated to not trust their own parents and certainly not believe in anything, quote, religious. We're coming to a time that Christians are going to have to realize that the government is no longer going to be friendly. You can see it in California. Look at Grace Community Church out near Los Angeles, John MacArthur's church. Been there for years, lots of people. I've got a friend of mine that lives now in California. And I asked the question because she also happens to attend Grace Community Church. And she's a former journalist, so she knows how to get information. And I asked her, I said, so how many people have gotten sick and died from the super spreader Grace Community Church? And the answer is zero of either. Zero of either. Wow. So you're telling me that Grace Community Church is not spreading the virus, but you have Governor Newsom screaming you can't sing, you can't praise God, you can't meet in public, you cannot go to church, but you can scream, curse, loot, set fire, and scream about the death of whatever in the name of Black Lives Matters. That's okay. Because, see, he'll tell you that the First Amendment protects freedom of assembly and speech, and yes, it does. But that same First Amendment, he ignores the free exercise of religion and no interference from government thereof, period. He ignores that part, but he embraces the one that he agrees with. Governor Newsom, it's not your business to agree or disagree with what an amendment to the Constitution states. It's a right given by God. This mentality that rights are given by the state is the beginning of tyranny. When you believe that your God-given rights are given to you by the state as a gift that can be taken back on a moment's notice, you are now living in tyranny. We as Christians are going to have to use platforms like I'm using today. I'm just one little tiny voice out there. I'm not some big $23 million a year conservative superstar on radio and TV. It's just little old me on this microphone talking to you, trying to keep my head above water with the cost of the airtime. Thankfully, it's not that much. To have this medium to keep us communicating with each other. I'm also running it as a podcast and run it off my website. I'm certain the day will come that certain podcast will magically disappear because you're not saying the politically correct thing. And that's why I don't... Do I use Facebook to talk about this? Yeah, but I say very little. I don't want to be in their crosshairs like as a target for Facebook. I don't need that. I don't want that. I don't want that kind of attention. I want to be well known on the platforms that I'm working to develop. Online and even networking on the radio. I can see the day coming when some AM stations in medium-sized towns, young people, they depend upon their phone. That's their life. They think that all music comes from a phone and over-the-air television is stealing or something. Those that normally would seek to come after a voice like mine, they don't listen much to radio. A few DXers, people that think of it as a hobby. But as far as people getting their news off radio or getting it from the kind of places that I hang out, they don't even know they exist. That's one of the things that I really enjoy about being on shortwave. My voice between the frequencies I'm on covers literally all the real estate of the 48 contiguous states and into Alaska. And as a byproduct and as a bonus, I even get Canada to go into that number as well. Kind of exciting. And I know that some of the frequencies at certain times of the day, I'm reaching part of Europe and I'm reaching the United Kingdom. I know that from some emails that I've gotten from your weekend show. I'm a lone voice crying out in the wilderness, so to speak. I'm not comparing myself to John the Baptist, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that I have been called to give this message to you for a reason. And as the days and weeks go by, the guests and people that I'll bring on will give you one new little piece of truth, fact, and knowledge. Today, the educational system tries to throw a bunch of knowledge into our kids' heads, but they don't give them common sense. Therefore, they cannot turn knowledge into something vastly more important, which is called wisdom. And hopefully, as we seek truth together on this radio program, we will. Please let me know you're listening. If you're listening by podcast, whether you listen on the radio, wherever, please let me know. I need to hear from you. I want to keep this thing going for quite a long time. Basically until Jesus comes. That's my prayer.
This has been Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman. To find out more, visit our website, truth2ponder.com. That's truth2ponder.com. Truth to Ponder, shining the light of truth in a darkening world.